"I don't need your help," she slurred, stumbling in her designer heels as snowflakes caught in her dark hair. "I'm your boss, not some damsel in distress." But as James steadied Katherine outside the office Christmas party, his daughter's small hand clutching his, he saw something beneath her cold exterior that no one at the firm ever noticed, profound loneliness that mirrored his own. Neither of them could have predicted that this reluctant Christmas walk would lead to the family they both secretly yearned for. If you've ever believed that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unexpected moments, hit that like button. And if you want more stories about how life's challenges can lead to our greatest blessings, subscribe to our channel. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. James Parker checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The office Christmas party had already gone an hour longer than scheduled, and his babysitter had texted twice asking when he'd be home. As the newest junior architect at Westfield Design Associates, he couldn't afford to leave early, not when the partners were still mingling, and especially not when Katherine Westfield herself was still holding court by the bar. "Daddy, I'm tired," whispered 6-year-old Emma, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. She hadn't complained once in the 3 hours they'd been there, coloring quietly in the corner with the activity book and crayons James had packed, but even her remarkable patience had limits. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer," James promised, smoothing her blonde curls. He hadn't planned on bringing her, but his regular sitter had cancelled at the last minute with the flu, and his mother lived 2 states away. It was either bring Emma or miss the party entirely, and Katherine Westfield had made it very clear that attendance was mandatory. "Parker." The sharp voice cut through the dwindling crowd. "Are you hiding over there?" James straightened as Katherine Westfield approached, champagne glass in hand. At 42, she was striking rather than conventionally beautiful, tall and angular with sharp cheekbones and dark hair cut in a severe bob that emphasized her intense gray eyes. As the founder and principal architect of the firm, she had a reputation for brilliance matched only by her exacting standards and icy demeanor. "Ms. Westfield," James nodded respectfully. "Great party." Katherine's gaze dropped to Emma, who instinctively moved closer to her father's leg. "You brought a child to an office function?" Her tone made the question sound like an accusation. "My babysitter cancelled last minute," James explained, trying to keep his voice even. "This is my daughter, Emma." Katherine studied the child with the same critical eye she used to evaluate building plans. Emma, to her credit, stared right back. "You have her eyes," Katherine finally said, the observation seeming to surprise even herself. She swayed slightly, and James realized she was more than a little drunk, something he'd never witnessed in the 6 months he'd worked for her. "Thank you," James replied, though it wasn't exactly a compliment. Emma had inherited his blue eyes, one of the few physical traits she shared with him rather than her mother, who had walked out when Emma was barely 2. Katherine drained her champagne glass and set it on a nearby table with deliberate precision. "Well, Parker, since you've fulfilled your obligation to appear, you may as well go home. Children need their sleep." "Thank you, Ms. Westfield." "Merry Christmas," James said, relief washing over him as he took Emma's hand. They were almost to the door when a crash and murmur of concerned voices made James turn. Katherine had stumbled against a table, sending a tray of empty glasses to the floor. The remaining party guests were watching with a mixture of shock and uncomfortable fascination as the normally composed Katherine Westfield braced herself against the wall. "I'm fine," she snapped at a concerned colleague who approached. "Just get me my coat." James hesitated, torn between self-preservation and concern. Katherine had never shown him any particular kindness, in fact, she'd been harder on him than most, but he couldn't just leave her in this state. "Emma, wait here for just a second," he said, guiding his daughter to a chair before approaching his boss. "Ms. Westfield, can I call you a car?" he offered quietly. Katherine's eyes flashed. "I'm perfectly capable of getting myself home, Parker. I live 6 blocks away." "It's snowing, and it's late," James pointed out. "At least let me walk you home." "I don't need a knight in shining armor," she said, but her voice lacked its usual bite. Consider it a professional courtesy, James insisted. I'd do the same for any colleague. Katherine studied him for a long moment, her gray eyes slightly unfocused. Fine, she finally said. If it will make you feel better about yourself, you can walk me home. Consider it your Christmas challenge, Parker. See if you can tolerate me outside the office. James bit back a sigh. Even drunk, Katherine Westfield managed to make accepting help sound like she was doing him a favor. Daddy? Emma had appeared at his side, her small face concerned. Change of plans, sweetheart, James said gently. We need to help Ms. Westfield get home first, and then we'll go to our house. Is that okay? Emma nodded solemnly, her natural kindness overriding her fatigue. Is she sick? Just tired, James said diplomatically. Like you. Katherine watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. For a moment, James thought she might rescind her acceptance of his help, but instead, she simply turned toward the coat check. 10 minutes later, they stepped out into the snowy December night. Katherine had insisted she could walk in her heels despite the accumulating snow, but James kept a cautious hand near her elbow as they navigated the sidewalk. Emma trudged alongside them, occasionally reaching out to catch snowflakes on her mittens. You're good with her, Katherine observed after they'd walked a block in silence. James glanced down at Emma with a smile. She makes it easy. She's the best thing in my life. Her mother? Katherine asked bluntly. Left when Emma was 2, James replied, his tone making it clear he didn't want to elaborate. Katherine nodded, seeming to respect this boundary. My father left when I was 7, she offered unexpectedly. Never looked back. James looked at her in surprise. In 6 months at the firm, he'd never heard Katherine share anything personal. I'm sorry, he said simply. Katherine shrugged. Ancient history. They walked another block, the silence broken only by the soft crunch of snow beneath their feet and Emma's occasional delighted gasp at particularly large snowflakes. Why architecture? Katherine asked suddenly. James considered the question. I've always loved the idea of creating spaces that shape how people live, work, feel. A well-designed building isn't just functional, it can change someone's entire experience. Katherine nodded slowly. That's why I rejected your proposal for the Riverside project. James stiffened. The Riverside project was a major commission the firm had recently won, a community center in an underserved neighborhood. James had submitted a design concept, hoping to prove himself, but Katherine had dismissed it without explanation. It was technically competent, she continued, her words slightly slurred but her architectural assessment sharp as ever. But it lacked soul. You designed what you thought I wanted to see, not what the community needed to feel. The criticism stung, but James recognized the truth in it. You're right, he admitted. I was playing it safe. Katherine stopped walking, turning to face him with surprising intensity. Never play it safe in architecture, Parker. Safe buildings are forgotten buildings. I'll remember that, James said, meeting her gaze. Something shifted in Katherine's expression, a softening, perhaps, or simply the effect of the snowflakes catching on her eyelashes, making her look momentarily younger and less formidable. The moment was broken when Emma tugged on James's coat. Daddy, my feet are cold. James immediately knelt to check on his daughter, concerned. Her small boots were designed more for style than serious winter weather. We're almost there, Katherine said, gesturing to an elegant brownstone half a block ahead. My place. They reached Katherine's front steps, and James expected a quick thank you and dismissal. Instead, Katherine looked at Emma's reddened cheeks and made a decision that would change all their lives. You should come in, she said. Warm up before you head home. I can call a car for you. James hesitated, surprised by the offer. We don't want to impose. It's Christmas Eve, Parker, Katherine interrupted. Even I'm not heartless enough to send a child back out into a snowstorm with cold feet. Emma looked up at the beautiful brownstone with wide eyes. Do you have a Christmas tree? A strange expression crossed Catherine's face. No, she said quietly. I don't. Oh, Emma said, clearly disappointed but too polite to say more. But, Katherine added, I might have hot chocolate. That was enough for Emma, who smiled for the first time since leaving the party. James recognized when he was outvoted. Thank you, he said. Just for a few minutes. Catherine's home was exactly what James would have expected, elegantly furnished with clean lines and a sophisticated palette of grays and blues. What he hadn't expected was the wall of windows overlooking a small garden, now transformed into a winter wonderland by the falling snow, or the grand piano in the corner of the living room. You play? He asked, nodding toward the instrument. Katherine shrugged as she hung up her coat. Not anymore. It came with the house. Something about the way she said it made James suspect this wasn't entirely true, but he didn't press. Kitchen's this way, Katherine said, leading them through the immaculate living room. I'll make hot chocolate. I can help, James offered, but Katherine waved him off. Sit. Both of you. You've done enough good deeds for one night. James and Emma settled at the kitchen island while Katherine moved around the kitchen with surprising domesticity, warming milk on the stove and finding mugs in a cabinet. The alcohol seemed to have worn off somewhat, though her movements were still less precise than usual. Do you live here all alone? Emma asked, swinging her legs on the high stool. Emma, James said quietly, that's a personal question. It's fine, Katherine said, her back to them as she stirred the milk. Yes, I live alone. Don't you get lonely? Emma persisted with a child's directness. Katherine turned, a strange expression on her face. Sometimes, she admitted. But I'm very busy with work. Daddy gets lonely too, Emma informed her. That's why we got fish. Fish? Katherine raised an eyebrow. My goldfish, Emma explained. His name is Fish. Very literal, Katherine commented, the corner of her mouth twitching. Emma named him when she was 3, James explained. The name stuck. I see. Katherine poured the hot chocolate into 3 mugs, adding a sprinkle of cinnamon to each. I'm afraid I don't have marshmallows. That's okay, Emma said graciously. Cinnamon is fancy. Katherine handed them each a mug, then leaned against the counter with her own. For a moment, the only sound was Emma blowing carefully on her hot chocolate. This is weird, isn't it? Katherine said suddenly. Your boss, drunk on Christmas Eve, making you hot chocolate. James smiled. A little unexpected, maybe. You can say weird, Parker. I'm not going to fire you for honesty outside the office. Okay, it's weird, James admitted. But not in a bad way. Katherine studied him over the rim of her mug. You're different than I expected. So are you, James replied. Emma, oblivious to the undercurrents in the adult conversation, had spotted something through the kitchen doorway. Is that a Christmas present? She asked, pointing to a small, wrapped package on a side table in the living room. Katherine followed her gaze. Yes, she said after a moment. It's for my mother. Is she coming for Christmas? Emma asked brightly. A shadow crossed Katherine's face. No. She's in a care facility upstate. Alzheimer's. I'll visit her tomorrow, but she probably won't know who I am. The simple statement, delivered with practiced neutrality, explained so much about Katherine Westfield that James felt a tightness in his chest. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Katherine shrugged. It is what it is. We weren't close even before she got sick. Emma, sensing the shift in mood, slid off her stool and approached Katherine. With the natural compassion of children, she simply took Katherine's free hand in her small one and held it. Katherine looked down at their joined hands with an expression of such naked surprise that James had to look away, feeling like he was intruding on something private. "Thank you for the hot chocolate," Emma said seriously. "It's the best I ever had." Katherine cleared her throat. "You're welcome." The moment was interrupted by the sound of wind howling outside as the snowfall intensified. James moved to the window and frowned at the worsening conditions. "I should call that car," Katherine said, setting down her mug. "The storm's getting worse." James checked his phone. "I just got a weather alert. They're advising against travel now." He looked up apologetically. "I think we might have to impose on you a bit longer, if that's okay." Katherine hesitated, and for a moment James thought she might insist they leave anyway. Then she looked at Emma, who was fighting to keep her eyes open, and her expression softened. "You can stay," she said. "I have a guest room. The couch and there pulls out into a bed." "Thank you," James said, relief evident in his voice. "We'll be out of your hair first thing in the morning." Katherine nodded, then glanced at Emma. "She's about to fall asleep standing up." James turned to see his daughter swaying slightly, her eyes heavy. He crossed the room and scooped her up, her small arms automatically wrapping around his neck. "I'll show you the guest room," Katherine said, leading the way upstairs. The guest room was as elegantly appointed as the rest of the house, with a comfortable-looking sofa that Katherine efficiently transformed into a bed. She disappeared briefly and returned with a t-shirt. "For Emma to sleep in," she explained. "And there are new toothbrushes in the guest bathroom." "Thank you," James said, genuinely touched by her thoughtfulness. "This is very kind of you." Katherine looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. "It's basic hospitality, Parker. Don't read too much into it." But as she turned to leave, Emma's sleepy voice stopped her. "Ms. Westfield? Will Santa know I'm here instead of at home?" Katherine turned back, her expression softening. "Santa is very good at finding children wherever they are," she said with surprising gentleness. "Okay," Emma mumbled, already half asleep. "Good night." "Good night, Emma," Katherine replied, and then with a nod to James, she closed the door behind her. James got Emma changed and tucked in, marveling at how quickly children could adapt to unusual circumstances. Within minutes, she was fast asleep, her breathing deep and even. He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the strangeness of the situation. Here he was, spending Christmas Eve in Katherine Westfield's guest room, the same woman who had made his professional life challenging for months. The same woman who, beneath her icy exterior, played piano, made hot chocolate with cinnamon, and spoke gently to sleepy children. After ensuring Emma was settled, James quietly made his way downstairs, feeling he should at least thank Katherine properly before turning in himself. He found her in the living room, standing by the windows watching the snow, a glass of water in her hand. "She's asleep," James said softly. Katherine turned. "Good. Children need their rest. You sound like you have experience with them." "Just observation," Katherine replied. "I never had children." "That never, rather than, don't have, spoke volumes." James sensed a story there but didn't pry. "I wanted to thank you properly," he said. "You didn't have to do this." Katherine gave him a wry smile. "What was I supposed to do? Send you back out into a blizzard? Even I'm not that heartless, despite what they say about me at the office." "I don't think you're heartless," James said honestly. "No?" Katherine raised an eyebrow. "Most people at the firm would disagree. Most people at the firm haven't seen you make hot chocolate for a 6-year-old at midnight." Katherine laughed softly, the sound so unexpected and warm that James found himself smiling in response. "Fair point," she conceded. "Though I'd appreciate if you kept that particular observation to yourself. I have a reputation to maintain." "Your secret's safe with me," James promised. He hesitated, then added, "for what it